Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be sketching and painting a building in Paris with a cafe on the ground floor. I will be using this watercolor sketchbook with 300 GSM paper, Kaweco Sport fountain pen with medium nib and water-resistant ink, this Winsor & Newton Cotman Sketchers pocket box, some synthetic brushes, and a piece of cloth and some water. You can find the details of the materials that I use down in the video description below. So I imagine that this may seem like a more challenging subject to draw for some people, and for some it may look pretty simple if you are more experienced. So let's see if we can break down the subject and tackle it with some simple methods. I will be using this Kaweco Sport fountain pen with a medium nib, and I have water-resistant ink from Noodlers inside this pen. The lines are really thick with this pen. Ink flow is also very efficient, very fast. So this is not going to be a delicate sketch with tiny details, but more bold strokes. And the line work is going to be more dominant. So before we start, it's always good to have a plan, although plans may change, right? So we have this beautiful cafe on the ground floor, which will be our main focal point of the sketch. And we have to make a decision about the remaining floors of this building because I'm sketching a small format in my little sketchbook. So I'm going to only include 3 floors of that building. So take time to visualize how big something will be on your page and how wide your view is going to be. Or you can just draw a section of a building. And one thing I like to do is to visualize where the main focal point will be on that page, because that is the most important part and I want it to be in the right place on that page. So we are doing this loose sketch freehand using a pen with no pencil sketch first. So just going straight in with a pen is exciting and scary at the same time. But over time, you do get used to it. So to make it easier for you to visualize each section of the sketch, you can make little dots on the page like so to indicate the main corners and levels of this building. When I'm doing multiple similar sections, I also like to use my fingers to measure each level like I'm doing right here so that they are not too different in size. So things become smaller the further away they are from you. So when sketching these 3 levels, you have to remember that the top floors are further away from you. So make sure you make the ground floor, which is nearest to you, the tallest when compared to the other top floors. If you want, you can make each level slightly smaller or shorter than the floor below. This will help to make your sketch look more realistic, if realistic is your goal. For me, I find that the first stroke is definitely the hardest, and it's always hardest at the beginning, but after that first step, it always gets easier. So I made a really naughty, a wonky line there because I paused and applied pressure a little too many times for that one line. So not all pens do that, and so the type of pen that you use does influence the style of your piece quite a lot. So you can take that into consideration when choosing a suitable pen to sketch with. And it's also important to note that I'm not following this reference photo exactly. I'm adjusting it to the size of my page and the angle that I want it in. And I'm focusing right now I'm focusing mostly on sketching the ground floor cafe first. So I'm tackling this sketch in a few sections. So right now I'm drawing the awning on the right side, and basically I'm just expanding downwards from that first line. So everything is in relation to each other. So I compare the left side to the right side. I compare how tall each thing is when compared to each other, and I have no expectations of perfection. And basically, I'm not drawing any straight lines. They're all crooked, they're all broken up. Sometimes I exaggerate some things. It's all up to you how much you want to follow the reference or not. So imagine we're standing in front of this building, and our eye is the same as the eye level of these people who are standing in front of that cafe. So there we have the horizon line. That's what we call the horizon line. And in very simple terms, the lines of this building slant towards points on that horizon line. So above the horizon line, they slant downwards, whilst below the horizon line, the lines of that building slant upwards towards those points. So try to imagine those perspective lines as you sketch. Is this line below or above the horizon line? Will it slant upwards or downwards? Or where is the vanishing point? So asking those questions will help you to improve upon your perspective. Of course, it is a process, and every time you draw something new, you will learn something new each time. So for this particular piece, the left and right sides, they don't slant at the same angle because the vanishing point is a little further away on the left side. So now we know where the horizon line is, and that is where we can start drawing this person's head, and followed by the torso. So this is when I definitely wished that I had used a thinner nib, because it's quite hard to draw small things and details with these very thick lines. But no worries, no matter the outcome, we have to soldier on and complete this. So after completing the torso, I'm now drawing the legs, and as a rule of thumb, we have 2 head lengths for the torso up to the waist, and then 2.5 torso lengths for the legs. And by legs, I mean from the waist up to the feet. So I like to use the waist as a reference point because you can usually see that point through all the clothing. So if you struggle with human proportions, that's a very rough guide for you. And there are many ways and many videos on human anatomy, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. So this video is in real time. None of it is sped up, so you can follow along if you like. And if you do, leave a comment down below so I will know. And if you like, you can adjust the playback speed to your liking, either faster or slower. So happy sketching! So as you can see, I started drawing these windows and it's nothing too difficult. Basically just rectangles and some lines for the shutters. The windows on the right wall looks much narrower than the ones in the center and the left wall. So the right side of the building will also be brighter. So the lines here, I'm trying to make it more broken up and less defined. So moving on to the third floor, and this is where I'm going to be exercising that artistic license. I'm going to change it up a little bit, and this level has a large balcony with no plants in the reference photo. So I'm going to be adding plants because a little bit of green on that top, I think it will look quite nice. Alright, so I started out with a plan for this sketch, and we did each level of the building separately, and I did plan to have the sketch be a quick one, but plans do change, and I felt that it needed more chairs and tables and details. So, all in all, the sketch did come out less loose than I was planning for, and it did take more time than I intended. So, this is because I have a tendency for adding details. So, we could definitely loosen the sketch up a little more if we wanted to. Alright, so we are done with the line work. So I usually leave this line work to dry for at least a few minutes before I start painting over it with watercolor. So always with a little plan first. Light is hitting this area a lot. Sunlight is coming from the top right. So these areas below the awning and below the balconies will be in shadow. So I am planning to add more green in this two areas right here on the balcony and the plant on the bottom right. So the left side will be in more shadow than the right side as well. So now I'm using yellow ochre for that first wash, and I'm mixing in a very small amount of ultramarine into that yellow ochre. For this piece, I'm going to try and let the line work be more dominant. So I'm applying lighter washes of paint for this particular piece. And I don't fill in the blanks. I like to leave some areas unpainted, especially where I think light could be shining over there or it could be stronger. And the white of the paper is basically the lightest part of your piece. So you want to try and preserve some of the white of the paper. Here I'm mixing sap green with that yellow ochre for the greens of this piece. For this part, you want to really load your brush with a lot of paint and water so that the paint does not dry immediately, and then you can come in with shadows later. Before the paint dries, I add ultramarine to that same mix and dab in some shadows. Next, I'm going to paint the red awnings, and I'm mixing cadmium red pale hue plus alizarin crimson hue. So it creates this sort of orangey red color. There are some white letters on the awnings in the reference photo, but personally I prefer not to focus on the letters. especially since this space is so small and it's very difficult to get really crisp letters. You could do it if you wanted to. You'd have to use a very small brush, but for me, I just prefer, for this size, I prefer to focus more on the colors, and so I leave these little white spaces. Sometimes they look a little bit like letters, sometimes they don't. So it's sort of like I'm blurring out the letters a little bit. Another easier way to do this is to just paint over the whole awning with this red paint, and then later on come in with white gouache to just write out those letters. If you haven't already noticed, I'm actually just using one brush for most of the sketch. So it is a size 6 Princeton Aqua Elite, and it is a travel brush actually. So you can kind of open the back and close it down into this really tiny little thing. So it's very easy for you to bring it on your travels. And I'm also using this Cotman Sketchers Pocket Box, the watercolors, and it is the student grade version of the watercolors that Winsor & Newton produces. You can check out the review I did on this box of watercolors if you like. So now we are going to introduce some blue into the sketch. So we have a light blue here, which is cerulean blue hue, and I'm going to be doing a light wash of this blue over all those windows. I also will be painting that dress a blue color, as well as adding that light blue to multiple areas of this piece, even if it's not the windows. So I did that as well for the red color, if you noticed. I added a little bit of red to a few areas, even though they are not mainly red in color. I just added a few dots just to disperse that color to a different part of that sketch. So now we're moving on to the shadows, and I'm mixing ultramarine into that cerulean blue hue, and we are going to start with some lighter shadows. So the shadows are looking a little bit too light, so I added some more ultramarine and some burnt sienna to that mix. So on a slightly different topic, I do wonder if you can hear the crickets, because I painted this at night and the crickets were really loud during this part. But I think I find it quite relaxing, so I won't be adding music to this part. So for this part, I will be just adding shadows, and I'll be doing it in a few layers, and so I will be progressively building up those layers. So let me know if you prefer the crickets as background music. At this point, I felt that the yellow was not saturated enough, so I added another layer of yellow ochre. Here I'm adding another layer of that ultramarine plus burnt sienna mix for those darkest shadows. Finally, we have come to the bonus round, or basically the fun part, which is adding some splatters to this sketch. If you do go a little bit overboard, you can use a wet brush and a cloth to dab off some of that paint. And it's done. As usual, if you found this video helpful to you, do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. On second thought, after looking at it for a while, I decided I needed to add more yellow to the ground floor because it has a lot of blue. So I wanted to have some yellow to balance that out, and I also added more shadows. Alright, I think we're going to stop right here. All in all, this was quite a challenging piece, but I learned so much and I hope you did too. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.